Welcome back to another episode of Azure MythBusters. I'm Mike James, and today we're looking at the myth that it's difficult to run .NET applications on non-Windows platforms. This is a really easy myth for me to dispel because I've been a Xamarin user since 2012 now, so a little while. And so I've been writing .NET code or C# code and running it on non-Microsoft platforms for years. In fact, Visual Studio for Mac, which was released a couple of years ago, is a C# application built for the Mac. It's .NET running on the Mac over here. I can show you this by creating a new solution. And we can actually create a Mac application using .NET in Visual Studio on the Mac. So we'll do next, .NET on Mac is going to be its name. We have the storyboard, which is Apple's way of designing user interfaces, and we have a view controller, which is again a class that comes from Apple. So if you're an Objective-C or Swift developer, this is going to make sense to you. As a Windows developer, kind of imagine this as a control. We can go to the declaration and we can actually see that this is just a wrapper on the native APIs. So it's doing something called platform invocation or P invoking. So this is a technique brought from Windows over to non-Windows platforms like iOS, Android, and the Mac, and it's how Xamarin works under the hood. It's kind of an implementation detail that most of us don't need to worry about day to day, but it's worth knowing that there's no magic, it's just P invoking under the hood when we're calling these native APIs. Now, we're using .NET and C# on a Mac. Do we get IntelliSense? Of course we do. If I type in view, I hit dot, I get a list of everything I can do. And if we scroll down here, let's see if we can find a property that we do some conversion for. Here we go. So if we do print job title, we can see straight away that it's using string as its primitive type. Now, string isn't a type that comes from Mac or iOS, so we actually do these primitive conversions for you to make life a little bit easier so that I can set that to just a standard type for .NET. So it increases the code sharing that I can do between iOS, Windows, Mac OS, and Android. So if we run that, you can see a super simple Mac application built with C#. And I obviously get the standard controls and mechanisms of a 100% native application built for the Mac. But also, Xamarin is most famous not for Mac applications, even though it's entirely possible, but I think it's most famous for the mobile side of things. So you've probably heard of Xamarin Forms. Well, Xamarin Forms allows us to build our applications for iOS, Android, Mac, Linux, Windows, Samsung's Tizen, and it's not official, but you can also build for the browser as well using Blazor. So you can build for multiple front ends, but from one shared project. So let's open up the Advocate solution, which is my Xamarin Forms project. And I have my code and then the heads, as we call them, so the iOS and Android. So the iOS application, just like we saw with the Mac application, it inherits from some things that are unique to iOS using the P invoking, the bindings. But this references our shared code. So our views, our view models, our logic, our boring bits of the application get to live in this .NET library. And this is just, again, vanilla C#, which we're sharing across all of the platforms. And if I build this, what I get at the end of it is a native application for the platform that I'm targeting. So this isn't a web view, this isn't hybrid, this is 100% native, and it's C# running with native performance on non-traditional devices. So here it's going to load some data off one of my web services. Come to Advocates, we can search. And we're getting pretty great performance here, considering that this is a cross-platform application. And it's a 100% native UI, so it feels and looks and behaves exactly how I would expect as an iOS user. Now, obviously, I could build this for Android as well. I could get this running on the Mac, and I can ship this to multiple places with the click of one button. So that's using Xamarin Forms. So I highly recommend, if you want to get started with .NET development on non-traditional Microsoft platforms, and you're building UI apps, then Xamarin Forms is a great place to get started. So come on over to GitHub/Xamarin/Xamarin Forms to grab the NuGet packages and read the documentation.